The pregnancy test clattered onto the marble counter, and Shay Thompson's entire world tilted sideways. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. Impossible. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the sink in Cho Young-soo's penthouse bathroom, the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, reflecting the glittering Gangnam skyline like a million tiny judgments. Her reflection stared back, dark skin flushed, natural curls wild around her face, eyes wide with something between panic and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. They'd been careful, always careful. Shay Ya. His voice cut through the bathroom door, low and smooth as expensive whiskey, that possessive Korean endearment wrapping around her name like a claim. Come out! She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her chest felt like someone had wrapped steel bands around her ribs and was slowly tightening them. I said, come out. Not a request this time. A command in that tone that made grown men in Seoul's underground scatter like roaches. Shay forced her legs to work, opened the door, and found Young-soo leaning against the doorframe. He discarded his suit jacket, and his white shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, revealing the black ink that crawled up from his collarbone. A dragon mid-flight, wings spread across his shoulders, scales disappearing beneath expensive fabric. At 6'2", he towered over her 5'6" frame, all lethal grace and controlled power. But it was his face that made her blood run cold. He wasn't surprised, wasn't shocked, wasn't anything except satisfied. You knew. The words scraped out of her throat. Oh my God, you knew. Young-soo's dark eyes tracked over her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle, with equal parts dread and something she refused to name. Of course I knew. We used protection. Every single time for 3 months Her voice cracked. What did you do? He pushed off the doorframe and moved toward her with that predatory smoothness that had once made her feel protected. Now it made her feel hunted. I stopped using them 4 weeks ago. The room spun. Shay grabbed the doorframe to keep from falling, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. You tampered with the condoms? I stopped using them entirely. He said it like he was discussing dinner plans, like he hadn't just confessed to destroying her entire life. You never noticed because when I had you underneath me, gasimil sureo tugobge mandaro julta, when I made your breath come fast and desperate, you weren't thinking about anything except how I made you feel. If you want to find out whether Shay escapes Young-soo's obsession or falls deeper into it, subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this story gets darker. Heat flooded her face, shame and rage, and the traitorous memory of his hands on her skin, his mouth trailing fire down her neck while he murmured filthy promises in Korean. She pretended not to understand. But you did understand, didn't you? That voice in her head whispered. You knew exactly what he was saying when he called you Nejit, mine. You got me pregnant on purpose. Her voice was barely a whisper. Yes. The casual confirmation hit her like a physical blow. Shay's hand flew up before she could think, aiming for his face, but Young-soo caught her wrist mid-swing. His grip was iron wrapped in silk, firm enough to stop her but careful not to bruise. Let me go! She tried to yank free, but he pulled her closer instead, until she could smell his cologne, bergamot and cedar, and feel the heat radiating off his body like a furnace. Anyo. No. His free hand came up to cup her jaw, tilting her face up to meet his gaze. I'm never letting you go, Shay. That's the point. You're insane. She shoved at his chest, but it was like pushing against a wall of muscle and ink and obsession. You trapped me. I trapped us both. Something flickered in his eyes, something raw and almost vulnerable beneath all that arrogant certainty. Do you know what happens when the head of the Baeko syndicate has a weakness? When word gets out that Cho Young-soo cares about an American woman, about a child? The words landed like ice water. Syndicate? What are you? They'll come for you. His thumb traced along her jawline, and despite everything, Despite the fury and betrayal coursing through her veins, her traitorous body still leaned into his touch. My enemies, my rivals, everyone who wants to see me bleed, and now I've given them the perfect weapon. Shay's mind was racing. 3 months. She'd spent 3 months falling for a man she didn't know at all. Then why? Why would you do this if it puts us in danger? Because you were going to leave. His voice dropped to something dangerous, possessive. Your contract ends in 9 weeks. You were going to go back to Atlanta, back to your safe little life, and I was going to become a story you'd laugh about. That intense Korean guy I dated in Seoul. I couldn't. His jaw clenched. I won't allow that. So you decided to baby trap me? That's your solution? You think I had a choice? He laughed, but there was no humor in it, only something dark and desperate. You walked into that gala at the Lotte Hotel wearing that red dress, and you looked at me, actually looked at me, like I was a man, not a monster, like I was worth saving. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, and she could feel his breath ghosting across her lips. Do you know how many people look at me with fear, with calculation, with greed? But you smiled at me, Shaya. You argued with me about American barbecue versus Korean galbi. You fell asleep on my couch watching K-dramas and made fun of my terrible English pronunciation. You made me feel human. Stop. She turned her face away, but he followed, his lips brushing her temple. I tried to let you go, he murmured against her skin. For 2 weeks after I realized I was falling, I tried. I told myself I'd end it clean, but then you'd show up at my apartment with tteokbokki from that street vendor you love, speaking broken Korean to make me laugh, and I'd think, maybe I could keep one good thing, just one. Shay's eyes burned. By forcing me? By taking away my choice? Yes. No hesitation, no apology. His hand slid from her jaw to the back of her neck, fingers tangling in her curls with a possessiveness that made her shiver. I'm not a good man, Shaya. I've killed people. I've done things that would make you sick, but I'm yours, and you're mine. And now there's a life we made together, binding us. What if I run? The question came out breathless. Yongsoo's smile was sharp enough to cut, his eyes dropping to her mouth. Then I'll find you. I'll burn down every city between here and Atlanta if I have to. You can hate me, fight me, make me bleed, but you're not leaving. His thumb traced her bottom lip, and she felt her resolve cracking like ice under pressure. Not now, not ever. And God help her. But the certainty in his voice, the dark promise wrapped in obsession, the way his body pressed against hers like he was trying to brand her with his heat. It terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. But what Shay didn't know yet, as she stood in that penthouse with a killer's hands cradling her face like she was something precious, was that Yongsoo wasn't the only one who'd been keeping secrets. Her consulting job, her background, even her arrival in Seoul, none of it was real. And when the truth came out about who'd really sent her into Cho Yongsoo's orbit, this pregnancy would be the least of their problems. Shay didn't sleep that night. She lay in Yongsoo's massive bed, his arm draped possessively across her waist even in sleep, and stared at the ceiling while her mind raced. 3 months pregnant, maybe 4. Her hand drifted to her still flat stomach, and the reality of it hit her in waves. A baby with a man who'd stolen her choice, trapped her with intention, and apparently ran some kind of criminal organization, syndicate. The word kept echoing in her head, Beho Syndicate. When dawn broke over Seoul, painting the Hanyang River in shades of pink and gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had to get out. Not today. He'd be watching too closely. But soon. She needed a plan. Yongsoo stirred beside her, his grip on her waist tightening reflexively before his eyes opened. For a moment, he just looked at her, dark eyes tracking over her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle, like he was searching for signs of rebellion. "Jaljaseyo? Did you sleep well?" His voice was rough with sleep, and his free hand came up to brush a curl away from her face with surprising gentleness. The duality of him was going to drive her insane. Not really, she admitted, because lying seemed pointless now. Something flickered in his eyes, regret maybe, or satisfaction that she was struggling. The first trimester is difficult. Hormones, anxiety. His palm flattened against her stomach over her silk sleep shirt, and she felt her breath catch despite herself. "We'll see a doctor today. Private clinic in Cheongdam-dong, the best." "I don't want She-ya." His thumb traced circles on her skin, and the casual intimacy of it made her want to scream and lean into him at the same time. "I know you're angry. I know you hate me right now, but I need to make sure you're both healthy. That's non-negotiable." She wanted to fight him, but the truth was, she needed to see a doctor too, needed to know if this pregnancy was even viable after all the wine she'd drunk before she knew, all the late nights and stress. "Fine," she said, hating how small her voice sounded, "but I'm not staying locked up in this penthouse." Yongsu's smile was slow and dangerous. "Who said anything about locking you up?" He sat up, the sheet falling to his waist, revealing all that ink and muscle in the morning light. The dragon seemed to move across his chest as he breathed. "You're not my prisoner, Jagiya. You're free to go anywhere you want." The endearment, "my darling," made her stomach flip. Really? Of course. He leaned down, his lips brushing her temple. "As long as Junho and Minseok go with you." "Who?" "My men. Security." He pulled back to meet her eyes. "I told you last night. Having this baby, makes you a target. I have enemies, Shay. People who would love nothing more than to hurt me by hurting you." A chill ran down her spine. "What kind of enemies?" "The kind that don't ask questions before they pull triggers." His hand cupped her jaw, tilting her face up. "So yes, you can go shopping in Myeongdong, get coffee in Itaewon, visit museums, whatever you want, but Junho and Minseok stay within 10 feet of you at all times. Not a prisoner, just constantly surveilled by armed guards, so much better." But looking into his eyes, Shay saw something that made her pulse skip. Genuine fear. He was afraid for her, terrified even beneath all that arrogant control. And that realization, it changed something she wasn't ready to name. "Get dressed," he said, standing and moving toward his closet. "We'll have breakfast at that cafe you love in Samcheongdong, the one with the honey butter toast." Despite everything, her traitorous heart warmed. He'd remembered. 3 weeks ago, she'd dragged him to a tiny cafe hidden in Seoul's traditional Hanok village, and he'd watched her devour honey butter toast with strawberries while complaining about how sweet it was. "You hate that place," she said. "You said it was too, what was the word, gyubda?" "Cute." His accent wrapped around the English word as he emerged from the closet in dark jeans and a white button-down, rolling up the sleeves to reveal more ink crawling down his forearms. "Too cute for a man like me." He caught her staring at the tattoos, and his lips quirked. "But you loved it, and you need to eat something gentle for your stomach." Shay's throat tightened. How was she supposed to reconcile this, the thoughtful gesture, the consideration, with the man who'd deliberately gotten her pregnant to keep her trapped? She slipped out of bed and moved to the bathroom, needing space to think. As she brushed her teeth, she studied her reflection. Same face, same body, but everything had changed overnight. There was a life inside her now, half her, half him. The thought made her dizzy. When she emerged wearing a yellow sundress, Yongsu was leaning against the dresser, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, and something heated flashed in his eyes as they traveled down her body. "Areumdawo," he murmured. "Beautiful. Stop." She grabbed her purse. "You don't get to look at me like that after what you did." He crossed the room in 2 strides, catching her wrist gently. "Look at you like what? Like you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." His other hand slid around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "I can't stop, Sheya. I tried, I failed, and now you're carrying my child, and every instinct I have is screaming at me to keep you close." His forehead dropped to rest against hers, and she could feel his breath ghosting across her lips, warm and dangerously close. "I know I'm a bastard. I know I took your choice, but I can't regret it. Not when the alternative was losing you." Shay's hands came up to press against his chest, intending to push him away, but her traitorous fingers curled into his shirt instead, holding on. "You're going to make me hate myself," she whispered, "for not hating you enough." His laugh was low and rough. "Then we'll hate ourselves together." He kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then the corner of her mouth, soft brushes that made her whole body ache. "Come on, let's get you fed before I do something that makes us both late." The drive to Samcheongdong should have been peaceful. Seoul's morning traffic was manageable, and the traditional neighborhood was gorgeous this time of year, with autumn leaves painting the narrow streets in gold and red. But Shay couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Young-soo sat beside her in the back of his black Mercedes, his hand possessively on her thigh, while two men she'd never seen before occupied the front seats. Junho and Min-seok, both built like walls, both with telltale bulges under their jackets. "Relax," Young-soo murmured, his thumb drawing circles on her leg through the thin fabric of her dress. "You're safe." But safe was relative when your boyfriend was apparently a crime lord. The cafe was exactly as she remembered, tucked between traditional hanok houses with wooden beams and paper lanterns, and the smell of fresh bread wafting through open windows. Young-soo guided her inside with his hand on her. Lower back and the elderly owner, Mrs. Kim, greeted them with warm recognition. "Shay Si and your handsome young man." She ushered them to a corner table by the window. The usual. "Yes, please," Shay managed, trying to smile normally. As Mrs. Kim bustled away, Young-soo reached across the table to take her hand. His fingers laced through hers, warm and possessive. "See? Normal. We can do normal." Could they, though? Could they sit here and pretend they were just a couple in love, expecting a baby, planning a future? The honey butter toast arrived, golden and perfect, with fresh strawberries and whipped cream. Shay's stomach growled despite her anxiety, and she took a bite, savoring the sweetness. Young-soo watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read, possessive and soft and dangerous all at once. His thumb stroked over her knuckles. "Better? It's just toast, Young-soo. It doesn't fix—" The window exploded. Glass shattered inward as gunfire erupted, and Shay's scream died in her throat as Young-soo's body slammed into hers, taking her to the ground beneath the table. His weight pressed her into the floor, one arm curved protectively around her head, the other reaching for something at his back. More gunshots, Mrs. Kim screaming, Junho and Min-seok returning fire with weapons that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Stay down!" Young-soo's voice was hard as iron, all traces of gentleness gone. He had a gun now, a sleek black pistol, and he was firing back through the broken window with lethal precision. Shay couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the sharp bite of glass cutting into her arm, the weight of Young-soo's body shielding hers, the deafening crack of bullets tearing through the peaceful morning. This was real. This was her life now. Through the chaos, she heard Young-soo bark something in rapid Korean, orders, commands, his voice cold and controlled, even as his heart hammered against her back. He fired 3 more shots, and somewhere outside, someone screamed. Then, as suddenly as it started, the gunfire stopped. Young-soo didn't move for a long moment, his breathing harsh in her ear, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. Then, "Are you hurt?" I don't know." He shifted off her carefully, his hands running over her arms, her legs, her stomach, checking for injuries with frantic precision. When his fingers found the cut on her arm where glass had sliced through her dress, his eyes went dark with fury. "Shay-ya, look at me!" He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Are you hurt anywhere else? The baby—" "I don't know." Her voice came out high and trembling. "I don't know. I can't breathe." His thumb stroked her cheeks, and despite the violence still humming in the air around them, his touch was gentle. Just breathe. I've got you. But he didn't have her. He dragged her into this nightmare, and now people were dying in a cafe that smelled like honey, and cinnamon, and Mrs. Kim was sobbing somewhere behind the counter, and Young-soo pulled off his button-down, leaving him in just a white undershirt that showed every line of muscle and ink. He pressed the shirt against the cut on her arm, his jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Jun-ho!" he barked. "Status!" 2 shooters on motorcycle, boss. Both down. Mrs. Kim is shaken but unharmed. Street is clear for now, but police will be here in 5 minutes. Then we have 4. Young-soo turned back to Shay, and she'd never seen him look like this. Controlled violence wrapped around barely contained fear. "We're leaving! Now!" Mrs. Kim will be compensated and protected. Junho's already calling it in. He pulled Shay to her feet, his arm like iron around her waist. "We need to get you somewhere safe before..." Before what? Shay's hysteria was building, threatening to break through. Before your enemies come back? Before they realize they missed? Before you go into shock. His voice softened fractionally as he guided her toward the back exit, keeping his body between her and the shattered windows. "Shaya, I need you to hold it together for 5 more minutes. Can you do that for me?" She wanted to say no, wanted to scream and cry and collapse. But something in his eyes, the desperation, the fear, the absolute certainty that he would burn the world down to keep her safe, made her nod. "Good girl," he murmured, and kissed her forehead even as Min-seo kicked open the back door and scanned the alley beyond. The Mercedes was already running, rear door open. Young-soo practically lifted her into the back seat, sliding in beside her and pulling her against his chest as Min-seo peeled away from the curb with the kind of precision that suggested he'd done this before. Many times before. Shay's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She looked down and saw blood, her blood soaking through Young-soo's shirt pressed against her arm, and suddenly the reality of it crashed over her like a wave. Someone had just tried to kill them. Kill her. Kill their baby. "I can't..." Her breath came in short gasps. "I can't breathe." "Yes, you can." Young-soo's hand cupped the back of her head, pressing her face into his neck. "Breathe with me. In for 4, out for 4. He demonstrated, his chest rising and falling against hers in a steady rhythm. "That's it. Just like that." She tried to match him, breathing in the scent of his cologne mixed with gunpowder and fear. His other hand rubbed circles on her back, and he murmured soft things in Korean she couldn't understand, but that sounded like comfort, like promises, like prayers. Gradually, her breathing slowed. The panic receded enough for her to think again. Who were they? Her voice was muffled against his neck. "I don't know yet." His hand tightened in her hair. "But I will, and when I find out who gave the order..." He didn't finish, but she felt the violence humming beneath his skin, barely restrained. "You killed them." It wasn't a question. She'd seen the bodies through the window, sprawled on the street, unmoving. Yes. No hesitation. No remorse. Shay pulled back to look at him, and what she saw in his face made her chest ache. He looked wrecked, jaw clenched, eyes dark with fury and fear, a muscle ticking in his temple. One hand still pressed his shirt against her bleeding arm, while the other cupped her face like she might disappear. "I told you," he said quietly. "I told you having you makes you a target, and you didn't believe me. I believe you now." The words came out broken. Something shifted in his expression, satisfaction mixed with regret. "I'm taking you somewhere they can't reach you, somewhere I can keep you safe until I figure out who's behind this." "Where?" "Jeju Island. I have a house there. Private, secure, off the grid." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "No one will touch you there. I promise." A house on Jeju Island, private and secure, which was code for isolated and inescapable. "That's not a request, is it?" Shay's voice was hollow. "No, at least he was honest. You're in danger, Sheya, real danger, and until I eliminate the threat, you need to be somewhere I can protect you completely. You mean somewhere I can't run? His jaw clenched. That too. The car sped through Seoul's streets, weaving through traffic with illegal precision. Shay watched the city blur past, the place she'd fallen in love with, the place that had seemed so magical and full of promise 3 months ago. Now it looked like a war zone waiting to happen. Your arm needs stitches, Yong-soo said, examining the cut with clinical focus. We'll stop at the clinic first, then head to Gimpo Airport. I have a plane waiting. Of course he did. Private planes and island fortresses and men who materialized with guns. This was her life now. What about my things? My apartment? Junho will pack everything and bring it to Jeju. You're not going back there, too exposed. Just like that. Her entire life in Seoul packed up and moved without her consent, again. But when she opened her mouth to argue, she caught sight of Yong-soo's hand still pressed against her wound, his knuckles white with pressure, a smear of her blood across his tattooed forearm. He was holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world, like losing her would break something fundamental inside him. And despite everything, the manipulation, the lies, the violence, she realized something terrifying. He meant it, all of it. The obsession, the possessiveness, the willingness to kill and die to keep her safe. This wasn't a game to him, it was survival. Yong-soo, she whispered, what have you gotten me into? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and his eyes were filled with something raw and desperate. Everything, Jagia. I've gotten you into everything, and I'm sorry. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. I'm sorry you're hurt. I'm sorry you're scared. I'm sorry I brought this darkness into your life. But you're not sorry enough to let me go. No. His voice cracked. Never that. I'd rather watch you hate me from inside a fortress than attend your funeral because I was too weak to keep you. The car pulled up to a modern building in Cheongdam-dong, sleek glass and steel, no signs, just a discreet entrance. The clinic. Min-seok opened the door and Yong-soo guided her out, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. As they walked inside, Shay caught her reflection in the glass doors. Her yellow sundress was torn and blood-stained. Her hair was wild with glass fragments caught in the curls. Her eyes looked hollow, shocked. She looked like a woman who'd just survived an assassination attempt. She looked like Cho Yong-soo's woman. And the most terrifying part? As the doctor stitched her arm and Yong-soo held her other hand with a grip that promised he'd never let go, Shay realized she wasn't sure she wanted him to anymore. Because out there, beyond these walls, were people who wanted her dead. And in here, holding her hand while her blood dried on his skin, was the monster who'd just proven he'd kill to keep her alive. The cage was closing, the lock was turning, and Shay was running out of reasons to fight it. What she didn't know yet, as the private jet carried them toward Jeju Island and the gilded prison waiting there, was that the attack at the cafe, that was just the beginning. And the real threat wasn't coming from Yong-soo's enemies at all. It was coming from the people who'd sent her to Seoul in the first place. The house on Jeju Island wasn't a house. It was a fortress disguised as paradise. Shay stood on the wraparound deck, watching the East China Sea crash against black volcanic rocks below, and tried to remember what freedom felt like. 5 days since the attack. 5 days of white bandages on her arm, Yong-soo's eyes tracking her every movement, and the suffocating realization that she was completely, utterly trapped. The property was stunning. She'd give him that. Modern architecture blending seamlessly with Jeju's natural landscape, floor-to-ceiling windows framing ocean views, a private beach accessible only through a guarded gate. Inside, everything was luxury. Italian marble, Korean art, a kitchen bigger than her entire Atlanta apartment. But luxury didn't change what it was. A cage. Just a beautiful one. You should be resting. Yong-soo's voice came from behind her, and she felt him approach before his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His chin rested on her shoulder, and despite everything, her body relaxed into his warmth. That was the problem. Her body kept betraying her brain. "I've been resting for 5 days," she said, her hands settling over his at her stomach, a gesture that was becoming automatic, natural, terrifying in its intimacy. "I'm going stir-crazy." "The doctor said to take it easy. Stress isn't good for the baby." His lips brushed her temple, then lower, trailing along her jaw in a way that made her breath catch. "Or for you." Shay closed her eyes, fighting the way her pulse jumped at his touch. Dr. Hahn had come yesterday, a severe woman in her 50s who'd done a full examination and confirmed what Shay already knew. 10 weeks pregnant, perfectly healthy despite the trauma. The baby was fine. She was fine, physically anyway. "I need to do something," she said, turning in his embrace to face him. "I can't just sit here staring at the ocean while you disappear into your office for hours at a time." He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, tension in his jaw that hadn't been there before Seoul. He'd been making calls at all hours, coming to bed smelling like stress and cigarette smoke, pulling her close like she might vanish if he let go. "I'm handling things," he said simply, "making sure what happened at the cafe never happens again. The people who attacked us are no longer a problem." His voice was flat, final. "The Park family out of Busan made a move on Seoul territory. They targeted you to weaken me." His hands cupped her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "They won't make that mistake again." The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, not whatever violence he'd unleashed, should have terrified her. Maybe it did, but it also made something dark and primitive inside her feel protected. God, what was happening to her? "I want to go for a walk," she said, needing to escape the intensity of his gaze. "On the beach. I need air that doesn't smell like this house." Young-Soo's jaw tightened. "Not alone." "Then come with me." She grabbed his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Please. 5 days, Young-Soo. I haven't left this property in 5 days." For a moment she thought he'd refuse, but then he nodded, and the relief that flooded through her was embarrassing in its intensity. "Okay, but you stay close to me." The private beach was accessed through a stone pathway winding down the cliff face. Young-Soo kept his hand on her lower back the entire descent, steadying her over rough patches, his touch both protective and possessive. When they reached the sand, Shay slipped off her sandals and let her feet sink into the cool, volcanic black grains. The beach was deserted except for 2 guards stationed at the far end, always watching, always present, her shadow wardens. They walked in silence for a while, the waves providing the only soundtrack. Shay tried to organize her thoughts, tried to figure out how to ask the question burning in her chest. "Tell me something real," she finally said, "something that isn't about syndicates or enemies or violence, something that's just you." Young-Soo was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My mother used to bring me here, before she died." Shay stopped walking, turning to look at him. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked almost vulnerable. "I was 8, he continued. "She'd rent a small house in Seogwipo every summer, and we'd pretend my father didn't exist, that his debts didn't exist, that the men who came looking for payment didn't exist." His hand found hers again, warm and strong. "She'd make me tangerine juice from the local farms and tell me stories about the haenyeo, the women divers, strong women who could hold their breath for minutes, who weren't afraid of the deep." "What happened to her?" Shay asked softly, though part of her already knew the answer wouldn't be happy. "My father's debts caught up with us." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his grip on her hand tightened until it almost hurt. "She tried to protect me. She failed, and I swore I'd never be weak like him, never let anyone I cared about pay for my mistakes." The pieces clicked into place. The obsessive need for control, the willingness to do anything to keep her safe, the fortress mentality. He'd failed to protect his mother, and now he was determined not to fail again, even if it meant becoming the very thing that destroyed people. "So you built an empire," she said, "became the most dangerous man in the room so no one could hurt you again." Yes. He turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her jaw. And then you walked into that gala wearing red, and you looked at me like I was a man worth saving, like I was more than what I'd become. His thumb traced her bottom lip. And I realized I'd trade every bit of power I've built to keep that look in your eyes. Shay's breath caught. The intensity in his gaze made her feel stripped bare, seen in a way that was both terrifying and intoxicating. "That's why you did it," she whispered. "The pregnancy. You thought if I left, you'd lose the only person who ever saw you as human." I knew I would. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "And I couldn't survive that, Shay-ya. I've survived everything else, poverty, violence, betrayal. But losing you, that would have broken something I can't rebuild." Her heart was hammering against her ribs. She should push him away, should hold on to her anger, her fear, her completely justified rage at what he'd done. But his vulnerability was a weapon she had no defense against. "You're asking me to forgive the unforgivable," she said, her voice cracking. "No." His lips brushed hers, feather-light testing. "I'm asking you to survive with me. We don't have to call it forgiveness. We can call it adaptation." Despite everything, she almost laughed. Adaptation. That's one word for Stockholm Syndrome. Is it Stockholm Syndrome if you're safer with the captor than without him? His mouth moved to her jaw, pressing soft kisses that made her knees weak. If the world outside is more dangerous than the cage? Shay's hands fisted in his shirt, torn between pulling him closer and pushing him away. "You're twisting everything." "I'm being honest." He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were blazing. "I'm a monster, Jagia. I've done terrible things, but I'm your monster now, and anyone who wants to hurt you has to go through me first." The declaration should have sounded insane. Instead, it sounded like a vow. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. The shift in him was instantaneous, his whole body going rigid, eyes sharpening to that dangerous focus she'd seen right before the cafe attack. "What?" Her pulse spiked. "What is it?" He was reading something on his screen, his jaw clenching tighter with each second. "We need to get back to the house, now." "Tell me what's happening." "Your friend Maya." He grabbed her hand and started pulling her back toward the path, his pace urgent but controlled. "The one you texted before I took your phone. She just filed a missing persons report with the U.S. Embassy in Seoul." Shay's heart stopped. "She what?" "She told them you sent a distress message and then disappeared. The embassy is asking questions." His grip on her hand was almost painful as they climbed the stone pathway. "Questions that are going to lead them here if we're not careful." "But that's good, isn't it?" Even as she said it, something in his expression made her doubt. "The embassy can help me." Yongsu stopped walking abruptly and spun to face her. "Help you how, Shay? By making you a bargaining chip between governments? By turning you into an international incident?" His hands gripped her shoulders. "You're carrying the child of Korea's most wanted crime lord. Do you really think anyone's priority is your safety?" The way he said it, cold, calculated, brutally honest, made ice flood her veins. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the moment they confirm your location, you become valuable for all the wrong reasons. To the U.S. government, to the Korean police, to my enemies who'll see an opportunity in the chaos." He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "The only person who wants to keep you alive more than they want to use you is me." Shay wanted to argue, wanted to believe he was manipulating her, twisting the truth to keep her compliant. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine fear there beneath all that controlled violence, she wasn't sure he was wrong. "So, what do we do?" The question felt like falling. "We stay smart. We stay hidden." His thumb stroked her cheek. "And we prepare for the possibility that your old life is about to come looking for your new one." As they reached the house, Shay glanced back at the ocean, vast and endless and completely indifferent to her crisis. 5 days ago, she'd been shot at in a cafe. Now her best friend had potentially put a target on her back by trying to save her. The cage was getting smaller, the exits were disappearing, and the monster, holding her hand, he might be the only thing standing between her and something worse. What Shay didn't know yet, as Yong-soo guided her inside and immediately disappeared into his office to make calls, was that Maya's report had done more than alert the embassy. It had triggered protocols, activated assets, set in motion a series of events that would force Shay to confront a truth she'd been avoiding since the moment she woke up in Seoul 3 months ago. Nothing about her life had ever been real. Not her job, not her apartment, not even her reason for being in South Korea. She'd been a chess piece from the beginning, and the player moving her across the board was about to reveal themselves. Shay waited 3 days before she tried to run. 3 days of watching Yong-soo's guards rotate shifts, learning their patterns, memorizing the blind spots in the security cameras. 3 days of playing the compliant girlfriend, letting him hold her at night while his breathing evened out into sleep, all while her mind raced with escape routes and desperate plans. Maya's missing persons report had changed everything. It meant someone was looking for her. It meant there was still a world outside this gilded cage that remembered she existed. It meant she had to try. The opportunity came on a Thursday morning. Yong-soo had left for Seoul before dawn. Something about meeting with his lieutenants, his voice tight with tension as he'd kissed her forehead and promised to be back by nightfall. Junho and Min Seok were with him, leaving only 2 guards on the property, one at the main gate, one patrolling the perimeter. Shay had watched them long enough to know the perimeter guard took a cigarette break at the far end of the property every day at 10 a.m., a 15-minute window where the beach path was unmonitored. 15 minutes. That was all she needed. She dressed in dark jeans and a black sweater despite the mild Jeju weather, pulled her hair into a tight bun and tucked her passport, the one thing Yong-soo hadn't confiscated, probably because he didn't think she'd actually try, into her back pocket. Her hands shook as she crept down the stairs, every creak of the floorboard sounding like gunshots in the silent house. The kitchen door that led to the beach path was locked, but she'd memorized the code by watching Yong-soo punch it in. 4 digits, 0814, August 14th. The day they met at the Lotte Hotel Gala. She'd mentioned it once in passing, surprised he remembered the exact date. Now she knew. He'd been marking it like a hunter marks his prey. The lock clicked open. Shay's heart hammered as she slipped outside into the cool morning air. The path stretched before her, winding down through volcanic rock and wild grass toward the black sand beach. Beyond that, she could see the main road in the distance, maybe 2 miles if she ran. She ran. Her feet pounded against stone, her breath coming in gasps that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with terror. Any second now, someone would notice. Any second, alarms would sound, and Yong-soo's men would come for her, and... She made it to the beach. The sand slowed her down, but she pushed through, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. So close. She was so close to freedom, so close to... A black SUV was parked at the public beach access point. For a wild moment, she thought about flagging it down, begging whoever was inside for help. But something made her hesitate. The way it was positioned, engine running, windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The passenger door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, wearing a crisp pantsuit that screamed government official. She looked at Shay with an expression that was equal parts relief and calculation. Shay Thompson? Her English was American, unaccented. My name is Director Peterson. I'm with the U.S. Embassy. Your friend Maya reported you missing. Shay's knees nearly buckled with relief. Oh my God! Oh, thank God! She stumbled forward, sand kicking up around her feet. I need help. I need to get out of here before he realizes I'm gone. Before Cho Yong-soo comes back from Seoul? Peterson's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. We've been monitoring his movements. We know he left this morning. We don't have much time. Something in the woman's tone made Shay's relief curdle into unease. How did you know where to find me? How did you know I'd be here right now? We've been conducting surveillance on this property since your friend filed her report. Peterson took a step closer, and Shay noticed the bulge under her jacket. A gun. We've been waiting for an opportunity. When we saw the reduced guard presence this morning, we knew you might try. The pieces were clicking together in a way that made Shay's stomach turn. You've been watching me this whole time. We've been trying to help you, Peterson corrected. You stopped responding to your supervisor at Atlas Global Consulting 3 weeks ago. That triggered protocols. Shay's blood ran cold. Atlas Global? What are you talking about? Peterson's expression shifted into something harder, more calculating. Come now, Shay. You're an intelligent woman. Surely you've started to piece it together. She pulled out a tablet from the SUV and turned it to face Shay. Atlas Global Consulting doesn't exist, not as a legitimate company. It's a CIA front operation. The beach tilted sideways. No, that's not. I applied for that job. I interviewed, and we selected you from a pool of carefully vetted candidates because you were perfect. Peterson swiped through files on the screen. Personnel files, background checks, psychological evaluations, all with Shay's name on them, all dated months before she'd even seen the job posting. 28 years old, no family ties after your parents' deaths, no romantic attachments, bachelor's degree, in international business with a minor in Asian studies. You even had a documented interest in Korean culture from your college courses. Shay's hands went numb. Her vision tunneled. You're saying I was, what? Recruited? Placed, Peterson corrected clinically. Your job was to get close to Cho Yong-soo, to gather intelligence on his operations, his associates, his vulnerabilities, to become someone he'd trust. She tilted her head, studying Shay like a specimen under glass. Though I'll admit we didn't anticipate you'd be quite this successful. Pregnant with his child? That's leverage beyond anything we could have engineered. The words hit like physical blows. Every conversation with her supervisor suddenly made horrifying sense. The casual questions about Yong-soo's schedule, the suggestions about which events to attend, which restaurants to visit, which people to introduce him to. The weekly reports she'd filed thinking they were just standard cultural consulting updates. She'd been feeding them intelligence without even knowing it. She'd been a spy, an unwitting weapon. I didn't know, Shay whispered, her voice breaking. I swear to God I didn't know. We know you didn't. That's what made you so effective. Peterson's voice softened fractionally, but her eyes remained calculating. An asset who doesn't know they're an asset can't give themselves away. You were genuine with him. That's why he fell for you. Shay's legs gave out. She sank onto the sand, her hands pressing against her stomach, where their baby, the baby he'd deliberately created to trap her, was growing. My entire life was a lie. Your entire life was preparation for this moment. Peterson crouched down to her level. And now we need you to finish what you started. Come with me to the embassy. We'll debrief you, get your testimony about his operations, and put you in witness protection. You and the baby will be safe. Safe. Shay laughed, but it came out broken, hysterical. Safe in another cage, another constructed identity. How is that different from what he's doing? Because we're the good guys, Peterson said simply, and he's a criminal who got you pregnant without your consent to keep you trapped. Was that true? Or was it just another manipulation, another person trying to control her narrative? Shay's mind was spinning, trying to process too much at once. Yong-soo had known from the beginning what she was, had told her that first night in the penthouse. He'd known she was bait and had fallen for her anyway, or maybe because of it, or maybe... How much does he know? The question came out hoarse. About me, about Atlas Global. Peterson's expression flickered with something that might have been respect. More than we'd like. Cho Yong-soo didn't become the head of the Baeko syndicate by being stupid. He suspected from your first meeting. That's why he kept you close, to figure out if you were a genuine threat or an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To corrupt you, to turn you, to make you his instead of ours. Peterson stood, offering her hand. "And it worked, didn't it? You're defending him in your head right now, trying to figure out if his cage is better than mine." Shay didn't take the offered hand. Couldn't. Her whole body felt like it was made of lead. "The difference," Peterson continued, "is that we'll let you go eventually. Witness protection isn't forever. But him? He told you himself, he'll never let you leave. That baby inside you was his insurance policy. You know that." Yes, she knew that. Had known it since the moment those 2 pink lines appeared on the test. But knowing something and accepting it were different things. "I need time to think." "We don't have time." Peterson's voice sharpened with urgency. "His security system has motion sensors on that beach path. Even with reduced guards, someone will have noticed by now. We need to move, Shay. Now." As if summoned by her words, Shay heard it. The sound of a car engine roaring up the coastal road, moving way too fast. Her heart stopped. No, it was too soon. He wasn't supposed to be back until tonight. Unless the security system had alerted him. Unless he'd turned around the moment she ran. Unless he'd known, somehow, that she would try. The black Mercedes came into view, skidding to a stop at the edge of the beach access. 3 doors opened simultaneously. Young-soo emerged from the back, Junho and Min-seok flanking him, all 3 moving with deadly precision. But it was Young-soo's face that made Shay's chest crack open. He looked devastated, furious, terrified. His eyes locked on hers across the sand, and the betrayal in them was a living thing. "You ran," he said. The words hung in the air like an accusation and a wound all at once. Shay's voice broke. "I had to try. Had to try." Young-soo repeated it like the words were foreign, incomprehensible. His hand moved to his back, and when it came forward, he was holding a gun. "Had to try to leave me. Had to try to run to them." His gaze shifted to Peterson, and something deadly flickered across his face. "Director Peterson, I wondered when you'd make your move." Peterson's hand moved toward her jacket, toward her weapon, but Young-soo was faster. His gun was up and aimed before she could clear leather. "I wouldn't," he said softly, his voice cold as winter steel. "My men have your driver in their sights. You shoot me, they shoot him. Your backup is 20 minutes away. We all know how this ends if you force my hand." Shay stood frozen between them, literally caught between 2 forces that wanted to use her, control her, own her for different reasons that somehow felt exactly the same. "Shay," Peterson said without taking her eyes off Young-soo, "come here. You're an American citizen. I can protect you from him." "She's carrying my child," Young-soo countered, his voice dropping to something possessive and raw. "She's mine. And I don't care what government agency you represent, you're not taking her." "Yours?" Peterson laughed. "She's not property, Mr. Cho. She has rights. And we have evidence that you've been holding her against her will, that you deliberately got her pregnant without consent." "I never said I didn't consent." The words came out of Shay's mouth before she could stop them, before she could even think about what they meant. Both of them turned to stare at her. "What?" Peterson's professional mask slipped. "Shay, he admitted to tampering with birth control. That's reproductive coercion. That's illegal in every—" "I know what it is." Shay's hands pressed against her stomach, feeling the slight curve that was barely visible but undeniably there. "I know what he did. I know what he is." She turned to face Peterson fully, and something in her chest was cracking wide open. "But you made me into a weapon without my knowledge. You constructed my entire life like I was a chess piece on your board. You put me in his path deliberately. We were trying to bring down a dangerous criminal. By using me." Shay's voice cracked, years of being controlled by people who claim to know better finally erupting. "By turning me into something I never agreed to be. At least Young-soo was honest about what he wanted from me. At least—" She stopped, the realization hitting her like a freight train. "At least when he trapped me, I knew I was trapped." Peterson's expression hardened into something cold and bureaucratic. You're confused. He's manipulated you, isolated you, created a dependency. And what have you done? Shay shot back. What's the difference between his cage and yours? Because from where I'm standing, Director, you both want the same thing, to control me for your own purposes. He wants me as his. You want me as your witness. Neither of you is asking what I want. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the waves seemed to quiet, waiting for what came next. Yong-soo hadn't moved, his gun still trained on Peterson, but something in his expression had shifted. His eyes were locked on Shay with an intensity that made her skin burn, hope and disbelief and something desperate warring across his features. "Last chance," Peterson said, her voice clipped. "Come with me now, testify against him, and we'll put you in witness protection. You and the baby. New identity, new life, safety guaranteed." "Safety," Shay repeated, and the word tasted like ash. "You mean another constructed identity, another life of looking over my shoulder, another cage, just with different bars?" She took a shaky breath. "How long would I have to stay in witness protection? A year? 5? Forever?" Peterson's silence was answer enough. Shay turned to look at Yong-soo, at the monster who'd stolen her choice but was looking at her now like she was his entire world cracking apart, at the man who'd killed to protect her, who'd built a fortress to keep her safe, who'd offered to burn down his empire if it meant keeping her. It wasn't a good choice. It wasn't even a sane choice. But for the first time in 3 months, maybe for the first time in her entire life, it was her choice. "I'm staying," she said. The words fell like stones into still water, rippling out in waves Shay knew she couldn't take back. Peterson's face went cold. "You're making a mistake you can't undo, Ms. Thompson." "Maybe." Shay's voice was steady now, certain in a way that terrified her. "But it's my mistake to make. Not yours. Not the CIA's. Mine." For a long moment, Peterson just stared at her like she was a failed experiment, an asset that had gone rogue. Then she lowered her hand from her jacket and took a step back toward the SUV. "This isn't over, Mr. Cho," she said, her eyes hard as flint. "We'll be watching. And the moment she wants out, the moment she realizes what you really are and asks for help, we'll be there." "She won't," Yong-soo said quietly, finally lowering his gun. His eyes never left Shay's face. "Because unlike you, Director, I'm going to give her something you never did." "And what's that?" His voice dropped to something raw and honest. "A choice to stay. Every single day." Peterson climbed into the SUV without another word. The vehicle pulled away slowly, deliberately, like she was giving Shay one last chance to change her mind. When Shay didn't move, didn't run after them, the SUV accelerated and disappeared down the coastal road, taking with it Shay's last connection to her old life. She stood there on the black sand, shaking, as Yong-soo holstered his gun and dismissed Junho and Min-seok with a sharp jerk of his head. The 2 men retreated to the Mercedes, giving them privacy, but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Yong-soo approached slowly like she was a wild animal that might bolt. He stopped a few feet away, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain, vulnerable. "You chose me," he said, and his voice cracked on the words. "Why?" Shay looked at him, really looked at him, at the dragon tattoo disappearing beneath his shirt collar, at the shadows under his eyes from sleepless nights, at the hands that had killed for her, held her, trapped her, protected her. "Because you're right," she whispered. "The world outside is more dangerous than the cage. She was never going to let me go, not really. Witness protection is just another prison with better PR." She took a step toward him, then another. "And if I have to be trapped somewhere, if I have to belong to someone," her voice dropped, "I'd rather be trapped with someone who's willing to burn the world down to keep me safe than someone who'll use me until I'm no longer convenient." His arms came around her like a vice, pulling her against his chest so hard she could barely breathe. She felt him shaking. This dangerous, deadly man was shaking as he held her like she might disappear if he loosened his grip. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured against her hair, his accent thicker with emotion. "When the security alert came through, when I saw you running on the cameras, I thought you'd rather risk everything than stay with me." "I did risk everything." She pressed her face into his neck, breathing in his scent, cologne and fear and something desperate. "And I'm still here." He pulled back just enough to cup her face, his thumbs wiping away tears she didn't realize she'd shed. His eyes were blazing with something fierce and possessive and almost worshipful. "I'm going to prove to you that you made the right choice. Every day, Shea. I'm going to prove that you're not just surviving with me. You're living." She didn't believe him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But when he kissed her, desperate and claiming and somehow achingly gentle, she realized something that should have terrified her, but instead felt like acceptance. She'd chosen her monster. Now she just had to figure out how to live with him. His hand slid into her hair as the kiss deepened, and Shea felt herself melting into him despite everything, despite the chaos and betrayal and impossible situation. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "We need to leave Jeju," he said, his forehead resting against hers. "Peterson knows where we are. She'll come back with more people, more leverage." "Where will we go?" "New Zealand. I have property there, completely off-grid, registered under shell companies even the CIA can't trace easily." His hands framed her face. "I'll dismantle my operations here, turn evidence over to Korean authorities in exchange for immunity, walk away from everything I've built." Shea pulled back to look at him. "You'd really do that? Give up your empire?" "It was never an empire, Jagia. It was a prison I built around myself after my mother died." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But you're the first thing that's ever made me want to be free." "What about your enemies? The people who attacked us? Taken care of?" Something dark flickered in his eyes. "The Park family won't be a problem anymore. I made sure of that." She didn't ask how, didn't want to know the details of what he'd done to protect them. "And the baby?" Her hand pressed against her stomach. "What kind of life can we give them?" Yongsu's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "A quiet one, a safe one, a normal one." He laughed softly. "Or as normal as it can be when your parents are a former crime lord and an unwitting CIA asset." Despite everything, Shea almost smiled. "That's going to be one hell of an origin story." "We'll tell them the truth," his voice turned serious, "when they're old enough, about how we met, what I did, what happened. They deserve to know their parents aren't perfect, that love is complicated and messy and sometimes starts in the worst possible way. And if they hate us for it, then we'll earn their forgiveness." He kissed her forehead. "The same way I'm going to spend the rest of my life earning yours." Shea looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd become her entire world through manipulation and obsession and a twisted kind of love she was only beginning to understand. "I don't forgive you," she said quietly. "Not yet, maybe not ever." "I know. But I choose you anyway, despite everything, maybe because of everything." She took a shaky breath. "Is that enough?" Yongsu's smile was sad and hopeful at the same time. "It's more than I deserve, which means it's everything I need." He lifted her into his arms. She gasped and grabbed his shoulders and started carrying her back up the beach path toward the house. "What are you doing?" "Taking you home," he said simply. "We have a plane to catch, a life to dismantle, and a future to build." His eyes met hers, and in them she saw the truth of what they were about to do. Ready to disappear with me, Jagia? Was she? Ready to leave everything behind, to become someone new, to build a life with a man who'd trapped her, but was offering her a kind of freedom she'd never had? Shea looked back one last time at the empty road where Peterson's SUV had disappeared, at the life she could have had, witness protection, safety, a constructed identity that wasn't really hers. Then she looked at Yongsu, at the father of her child, at the monster who loved her enough to change. "Yeah," she whispered, winding her arms around his neck. "Let's disappear." 6 months later, in a small coastal town in New Zealand that didn't appear on any tourist maps, Shay watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, while Yong Su, now going by Daniel Cho, built a crib in their cottage bedroom. Her hand rested on her very pregnant belly, feeling their daughter kick against her palm with what she was sure was her father's stubbornness. "She's active today," Daniel said, looking up from the instruction manual with a smile that transformed his face into something soft and human. "She knows you're building her escape route," Shay teased, and was rewarded with his laugh, that rare, genuine sound she'd been collecting like treasure over the past months. He'd kept his promises, all of them. He dismantled his syndicate, turned evidence against his rivals in exchange for immunity, and walked away from everything he'd built. They disappeared into new identities so thoroughly that even Peterson's resources couldn't find them. Every morning he asked if she wanted to stay. Every morning she said yes. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even fully healed, but it was real, and it was theirs, and it was built on choices she made freely now. "Do you regret it?" she asked, watching him work. "Giving up everything?" Daniel looked at her with those dark eyes that had once terrified her and now felt like home. "I regret how we started. I'll spend the rest of my life earning what I took from you." He placed his hand over hers on her belly, feeling their daughter move. "But regret you? Regret this? Never." As the sun dipped below the horizon and their daughter kicked again, Shay realized that sometimes love doesn't save you from the darkness. Sometimes you both have to walk through fire to find something worth keeping. And sometimes the monster teaches you how to be free. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated and built on ashes and forced choices. But as Daniel pulled her close and their daughter kicked between them, Shay thought maybe that was okay. Maybe perfect love stories were overrated anyway. Maybe real love, the kind that survived everything and chose to stay, was better. If you made it this far, thank you for going on this wild ride with Shay and Yong Su. Their story was messy, dark, and complicated. But that's what makes it real. If you want more Afro-Korean romance stories that don't hold back, subscribe now and let me know in the comments, Team Monster or Team Freedom. I'll see you in the next story.